something that also bothers me when it comes to that is, so I genuinely like when people say this book is a mix of A and B. What I do not like if that's the only thing. I need to be told why a thing is like A and B.
Yeah, what parts it has.
What parts of it.
Two.
Because especially when people go, this is like Lord of the Rings, which is something that's being said a lot in fantasy books. I'm like, is it like Lord of the Rings because we have elves and dwarves? Is it like Lord of the Rings because our heroes go on a long and arduous journey? Is it
like Lord of the Rings because it's gay as fuck? We don't know.
Yeah.
Quack.
Welcome to the Little Duck. I'm gonna have to do that again. Wait a minute. Little Duck Book Club. It's not easy to say. Okay. Welcome to another episode of the Little Duck Book Club with Duck number 1, Ren,
and Duck number 2.
And today it's gonna be even more of a rambly episode. We want to talk about pet peeves that we have in the book community and in like reading in general. But before we're gonna get into that, again, we're gonna have our little 5-minute thing at the beginning of the episode, talking about certain books we've read past couple of days, or just something that's come up in the community. So do you want to start? You've read a lot of books, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read that much. It hasn't been that long. I was on vacation and I read 3 books while I was on vacation.
Say how many days you were on vacation, though.
Yeah, we were 6 6-day vacation.
Just 3 books in 6 days.
There was a lot of train riding, so I was like, well, I don't have anything else to do on the train, so I might as well read, so, you know. 3, I guess, like, one of them was the second book from the Mortal Engines quartet, which I really enjoyed. It was really good. It's called, what was it? Predator's Gold, I think. It was good. Some parts of it I was like, okay, do we need this stupid romance subplot, really? Is this the motivation for some really important parts of the plot? But okay. Teenagers are stupid. I will accept it. It's not a deal breaker. It's like fine. I just don't really care for the romance parts of it. But otherwise, it's really good. I really like it. It's a really it's very imaginative. You know, with the like moving cities and stuff, which is interesting. But also, it's very obvious that Philip Reeves put a lot of thought into how these cities would work economically and how that would then impact the social structure and everything. So it's actually the world building is really, really interesting. It's not a concept I've seen before, but it's so grounded because he's thought it through so well. So I really, really enjoyed those. I got the next 2 books from the library to read.
How many books are in the series?
Well, it is a quartet, so there is 4.
Yeah, you said the second book of the quartet. I'm
so yeah, it is 4 books, but he's written more in the world. I think he wrote a prequel trilogy or something, or series also, and some standalones. I don't know if I will read them. You know, I am a prequel and sequel hater, but I think the prequels are like very like 100 years or more before, so it's not like talking about characters we've already met or like their parents, but it's about like
something else,
genuinely different characters in a genuinely different like stage of history of the world, which I think is more acceptable as a prequel to me personally. Otherwise, I read a thriller which was fine but not great, and I also read, I don't even know if it's horror. I think it's like mystery / a little bit of horror from Stephen King, The Outsider, which I think at the start was really strong, but then it progressively got less good. Like, it was still okay, but there was a lot of parts where I was like, okay, you've introduced you made it really suspenseful in like the first third. There were revelations at the end of the first third of it that felt like, oh, now it's getting interesting. We have the supernatural creature that's like, it seems very powerful and dangerous, but like the longer it went on, the more it was like, yeah, it's just kind of some guy. It's not that hard to get, like, you know, it was like, You said it, the setup was so interesting, and it was like suspenseful, and then it gradually kept getting less and less interesting, even though like, especially the setting for the climax was really, really cool and creepy. It was like this old mountain that was kind of hollow, so it was basically the whole mountain was crisscrossed with little like bubbles and like tunnels that connected and that created like super interesting acoustics in it, and it was basically like this labyrinth, and also it made the whole thing pretty unstable, so you couldn't fire your gun in there without the whole thing possibly collapsing in on you. So
that sounds nice.
That was, you know, that was really good tension, but then the actual confrontation scene was really like underwhelming, so I was like, ugh. There were so many parts where I was like, you could have made this so much more interesting. Why is this so boring? Even though it should be really interesting.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, it was okay.
What's the title of that one?
The Outsider by Stephen King. I get why people are like, wow, Stephen King's really long-winded, because at several points I was like, you could have done this more concisely. This did not need to be this long. Some parts are just like, okay, we could have.
Yeah. His books are unnecessarily thick. Let's just say it like that.
Yeah, and I've also, like, I know that, like, his short stories are really effective, and I sometimes wonder if this is just a general problem for horror in general, because, like comedy, horror obviously is built on suspense, right? And it is very difficult to uphold suspense and people's emotional investment over like hours and hours of hours. So of course, a short story is always going to be more effective horror than like a 500-page book, even if the book is really well paced and written. So I think it might just be that horror books will always kind of fall short just because it takes so long to read.
Yeah.
And even if all of it was like super engaging, your mind at some point would get numb to the level of suspense, because it's just, if it's continually like keeping you on the edge, eventually you're like, okay, whatever.
Like, yeah.
I've been sitting on this edge for like 3 hours. I'm halfway through the book.
But I feel like even like suspense can be held for like also like a 400-page book, like Lost Boy. I mean, the whole book was suspense, you know? So and that was like the grasp was quite good. I think it's if you put in enough breaks for the reader, where the reader thinks it's like
sure. And
remotely safe.
It also depends on like how effective like your threat is. Like if you write horror and your supernatural threat needs to be genuinely like at the like, it needs to be a shadow on the wall, even in scenes that are calm, theoretically. Like, the feeling of, like, underlying dread and, like, that something is not right should be there all the time. But, like, that's why I say I'm not sure if it's even a horror book or if it's more written as a mystery, because it has horror elements that are really strong in places, but at other times it's like, okay, our kind of main character is like a cop who's doing this investigation, and a lot of scenes feel like more mystery than horror because that suspense just is not there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But like, it was okay. Yeah. I wouldn't like be like, oh no, you shouldn't read this. I'd be like, yeah, if the premise is interesting to you, you could totally read it. It's not a bad read, but like, it could be better.
That's a good one though.
It could be better. But yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So one was very good, the second one was good, and the third one?
The third one was a thriller. I don't know if thrillers just might not be for me. I've tried reading thrillers before, and this one also had like very positive reviews and a generally high rating. But again, I felt like it was, I don't know, there was a part of it where like at the end there was like a reveal where it's like, oh, the main character had some information the entire time that you didn't know about. And I personally, I have not encountered a book yet where this is like an interesting twist to me. For the most part, it just feels like, wow, crazy, you had your narrator be dishonest with me with information I couldn't really have known, but also information that makes the story less interesting in a way. Because like the story is about like a a woman who's like an evangelical preacher who gets forced by some scandal to move into a tiny village and like be the pastor there, and like the village has like a history of like witch burnings during like Queen Mary's reign, where she rounded up all the like evangelicals and burned them because she was a very normal woman.
It was cold outside.
Girl boss energy. Yeah. No, but also it had like 2 girls go missing like 20 or 30 years ago, so there was also that, and the whole village is like has like kind of creepy vibes, and like a reveal at the end is that she's one of the girls who went missing, and like her friend was murdered who she supposedly ran away with, but like she's fine. But it's like, dude, I've read like there are other POVs, but like most of the book is from her POV. A lot of her like interaction, like the way it's told is just like, I understand unreliable narrators, but at this level I'm like, there's no way somebody censors their own thoughts to this degree that they would be like, hey, I grew up in this village and my life was so shit that I had to run away, and like not be like, oh yeah, I remember this part of this village, or like, oh, it's changed so much, or that she wouldn't like speak about people as if she already knows them. It's just like, wow, what a crazy reveal that doesn't really
do anything
enhance the story at all. Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, that sucks.
But yeah, it also had the subplot that like she had a brother and their home life was abusive, so he became kind of violent later on, and he was in prison and he got released. And there was like a whole subplot where he like tries to find her because he has an obsession with protecting her, which often ends with him being violent towards other people around her. So she's kind of scared of that, and you have some chapters from his point of view where he like kills people, but at the end that is not resolved. They don't actually end up interacting.
What?
He like saves her from a burning building, but she thinks she might have imagined it, and they never talk. They never actively interact. It's so disappointing.
Is it like the first book of a series or something? Or is it a standalone?
No, I don't think so. Everything is resolved by the end.
Except for that.
Like, there isn't really... Yeah, it's just
crazy.
Like... No, the reveal was basically just like, oh yeah, he was there and I guess he saved her, but she's not really aware of it. With the... It's so dumb.
That's crazy.
That one was dumb. And also, it had one of my least... It had a combination of 2 tropes, which I find very annoying. Like, the woman, the protagonist, had a daughter, and there was like... And that daughter met a boy in that village who, when we meet him, seems to have some kind of disability. He has like some like tics, like verbal and like bodily, so he has some brain issues, which is... And then it's revealed he was just pretending to be disabled, and also it's revealed he's an evil sociopath who murders people for fun. And that's like, first you get the reveal that he's an evil sociopath, so first it's like, oh great, the disabled kid is evil. And then it's even worse, where it's like, oh, his brain is just so fucked up, he was just born so wrong that he's like a murderer for no good reason. And also he pretends to be disabled because real disabled people don't exist. It's so bad. That wasn't... Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and sorry, it was not... The book's okay, the writing is, like, fine, but all the reveals at the end, it's really just like, wow, this gets worse.
Oh, no.
Yeah, a shame. So, I don't know, maybe thrillers are just not my thing.
I feel like thrillers are difficult, and I like murder mysteries and thriller on screen a lot more, because it's so much easier to hide clues for the audience in a picture, in a scene, without making it too obvious. But in a book you have to literally write it down, so either you have to swamp the reader with lots of details, and if they remember like the right ones, then they can also solve the puzzle, or it's super obvious what's happening.
Yeah. I've just had this experience with almost like, I think, with every thriller I've read that had some kind of like stupid reveal at the end, where I'm just like, either the reveal didn't do anything, or it's also a reveal where I feel like you have so heavily censored the internal monologue of the person who's telling the story that this doesn't feel earned, you know?
Yeah.
You could totally have a twist about the identity of a character, or even something your main character has done. Ironically, I have read an Agatha Christie mystery that had a twist like that with, like, your narrator, which was better because of how it was done. But, like, if you just reveal at the end to me that, oh yeah, actually the main character had this kind of information, which changes everything, but on the same level as just, like, but this wasn't, like, first of, it doesn't make sense for them to speak about circumstances in this way if, you know, they have this information the entire time.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's just not interesting often. It's just, like, this doesn't add to the suspense of the story. This makes it more boring. I am less interested now.
I think
it's like one, like the it was all a dream, like, plot twist at the end of the story. It's like, this doesn't change. Like, I knew it was a fictional story. This doesn't add anything at all. You're just being like, actually, none of this had a point, even for the characters in the story. Ha! Which is dumb.
I think one of those, the narrator or the main character knows something we don't. Funny moment for me was the Selena Aelin thing, because during the first book, it's like, oh, Selena Sardathian. No. Selena Galathinius, Aelin, she's like, she's trying to build an army, and then Selena's like, where's my arm? I'm kind of in prison for the past couple of years.
Yeah. I do feel like it's, like, less relevant there, because, like, know, from a meta perspective, you immediately know, oh, she's the lost princess. Of course she is. Like, in the second book, it's so fucking obvious. And, like, the reveal isn't treated as, like, oh, how crazy. It's just, like, at the end of the book of, like, yeah, that's
like,
her.
obviously.
We knew this. Yeah. And also, it's like, it's a fantasy story. It's not a mystery. Like, none of the stories, like, oh no, who could Aelin be? Where is she?
But it happens during it happens during the end of the second book, right? Or was it already?
Yeah, when she leaves, yeah. So it's not even like, oh god, like, in book 4 we get the reveal finally, but it's pretty much at the start. It's like, yeah. That would be so funny.
But
that would be hilarious.
Well,
the
book that I read, and I would have finished it because I quite enjoyed it actually, had I not bought Baldur's Gate 3, is Foundation. So I watched the first couple of episodes from the show, and I loved it. It's science fiction, it had an interesting premise, and I had bought the book before I even watched the show. So I was like, all right, watch the show. I can start reading the book. And I was a lot miffed that the character from Lee Pace, he isn't even in the book. So I was prepared for something completely different than what Foundation actually is. So far, it reads like a collection of short stories that do kind of interact with each other, but it feels less like, sometimes when books are like sorted into part 1, part 2, and it has like a vague title for each part. Here it feels more like these general, like, little short stories that are very connected to each other and have kind of like chapter names, but it doesn't really feel like a chapter. It feels like its own little thing because there's time jumps in between. We change main characters in between, and it's kind of fun to read. I think I haven't read something like in that kind of style ever, or in a long time. I don't remember. And I didn't expect it to be as, like, fun and dry at some points, considering the show. If you watch the show and then you read the book, it's there's a huge difference in there, but there's a certain matter-of-factness in the book that I really enjoy. It is quite an old book, and I have not met a single female character yet. Which is something that they did change in the show, because the gender of these characters has literally no impact on the story. So in the show, they just took a lot of characters and gave them to female presenting actors. So I was a bit surprised by that. I was like, oh, that's also a he? I think this is a trend. I think everyone is a he.
I mean, honestly, though, I think I'd rather read an old sci-fi books which just doesn't have women instead of an old sci-fi book where women breast-boobily down the stairs all the time. Like, I feel like if I'm gonna settle for a flavor of misogyny, I think no women is better.
It just it's a really, like, it's such a stupid concept in itself, in Foundation, where they're like, due to statistics and the human psychology, we can calculate what's gonna happen in the future, and it's like a subdivision of mathematics and psychology. And there's this one super, like, smart guy who dies at the beginning of the book, who, like, calculates this gigantic thing, like 1,000 years into the future. And he says, well, if we do this one thing, like, the empire is still gonna fall, but we're gonna recover after 1,000 years instead of 10,000 years. So it's like their mission to work towards that. But that's a bit like, it feels a bit like snake oil. Being like, I don't know, I calculated everything.
I love this. What a faith into a discipline that is historically not particularly accurate, even at describing the present. I say as a psychology
and at some
student.
point, it's really, like, it's kind of mean, but I feel, for me, that was the humor of the story itself. But I think there's, like, this huge, like, you know, oh my god, philosophical thing that the dude bros would discuss. But for me, it was just like, damn, he was really mean. Because they don't tell the people everything. Because if they are aware of the fact that there is this calculation thing, then they're gonna behave differently. Because then they're gonna, like, divert from the path that was calculated, because they know about the path. So they just send these people to a planet and they give them, like, a fake job to do for the next 50 years. And then 50 years later, an old vault opens up, and there's like a digital image of the guy, and he's like, well, you've been working for nothing for the past 50 years. This is your actual mission. You're settled down here now. You can't go away anymore because society has fallen apart and you don't have the machinery for it. Have fun.
I'm just fascinated by this idea that you could predict the future through psychology and statistics.
Yeah.
Like, how would you even predict the psychology of people who are not alive yet? Like, there is no way It is so nonsensical, especially also because, like, as if the material conditions of the world would not heavily influence what people do, which, I'm sorry, but a psychology degree is not helping you with that.
They do go about it where the mayor of the town, he's like, well, couldn't he have predicted what's going to happen to me? And then the scientists are like, oh no, he couldn't, because it's not about individuals, it's about, like, groups of people, you know, bigger groups of people. And the funny thing is, of all the scientists that went to this planet that got exiled to work on this thing, there was only one psychologist, and that guy did not have scholars. Like, he didn't have anybody who would take over his position on purpose, so they wouldn't have any psychologists in the future when they're being told while they're actually there, so that they can't recalculate the shit and change their path.
I love the idea that an average psychologist could calculate this shit.
They're just being left alone on this planet, and I was vibing with it. I thought it was such, like, the climate in the story itself. So far, I do really enjoy it. I don't know if I'm ever gonna read the whole series, because it's a lot of books. It's small books, but a lot of them. But yeah, that was the book that I currently have. And then in other news, this has been news for quite a while, but I didn't realize it. Mickey 7, a book that I mentioned at some point, cloning book, is getting a movie. And the movie name is Mickey 17. And it's like, it just, I was just...
7 isn't cool enough.
I was just pondering about it. Why 17? Is it because on the poster there's like a little minus? So it's like, ooh, like 1 minus 7 doesn't make, or like 1 is the real one, 7 fake ones, and then it's 8 in total, but that doesn't add up again because now it's a 17, so it should be 1 and like 1 normal one and 16 clone. It doesn't make sense to me. Do we want to see more ways where Robert Pattinson dies? Because Robert Pattinson's gonna play Mickey. It's like, how many more ways do they want to come up with this? So I was just pondering in my head, and I don't get it. Why is it Mickey 17? I am distraught over this. Genuinely.
I feel maybe because people would assume Mickey 7 is like the 7th part in a series, because that's like a conceivable number of movies in a series, but 17 is like too many. They're like, they wouldn't have made 17 Mickey movies without me hearing about
but
it.
But the thing is, there's no space between the name Mickey and the number in the book as well. It's like one thing, and on the poster as well. So I don't know, but I was a bit confused for it because I've seen like the posters, but I never really realized that it's not Mickey 7, but it's Mickey 17. But that's...
Yeah, also, I don't understand this from a marketing perspective. Like, those are both, like, prime numbers. There's not, like, why can't you just use the 7? Is 7 not cool
I genuinely
enough?
think...
Like, I love the number 17, too. But, like, if there's a canonical reason why the 7 is kind of important to the story, you should probably keep it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Or I genuinely think it's because of the 1 and the 7. You can like add it and blah blah. But I'm a bit distraught by that. But yeah, those are my book news. And it was not a 5-minute segment. We've been talking for 20 minutes.
I was about to say this was not 5 minutes
because you were so amazing and read 3 books, and I asked you about each of them.
I had I was like, well, I can give a short summary, but then you were like, no, I want the details. I want the juicy, interesting details.
What can I say? I'm an inquisitive duck.
I mean, we are messy bitches given the topic of this episode, so you know.
Messy hens, actually.
Yeah, we brood so much over our negative opinions. We're like, the book community.
Make the joke stop, please. I'm molting. All right, okay. So yeah, how did we even come up with this topic? So we thought about what we want to talk about, and we got to, you came up with a interesting topic, which was bad faith readers. And then and like bad critique and stuff. I was like, God, that is one thing that bothers me so much. And then in preparation, we noticed that it's not a lot of substance to talk about. Like the intro sequence would be nearly even longer than the actual thing.
Given this intro.
So we broadened it up a bit to just pet peeves in the book community itself. I was trying to do some research in terms of are there other people's pet peeves, but it was impossible to find it with a search engine because it would always automatically go to pet peeves in writing in books.
Oh.
Or it would go to pet peeves for very specific fandoms, because it was also like, how do we want a fandom pet peeves? So no internet research that I can present here because Google beat me.
Yeah.
Google beat me to the ground. I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these will be a little unique, I guess, to each person because people go to community for different reasons. I will say mine are probably a little outdated because I was so annoyed and like uninterested in the book community that like after a few years I was like, you know what? I don't need to interact with anyone. I don't even need to know what these people are insane about this week. I can just read my books and like live in peace.
You have me for that. So, I always report back to you. because I am a TikTok hater. Not for principled reasons, just because I hate short form video. I think it's ironically really boring. I think, so I don't use it. And I guess most of the drama nowadays is like from TikTok. And I also don't really use Twitter, so I also don't know what insane people are saying on Twitter this week either. X, as it's now called.
So yeah. Oh, true.
as X.
I would not want to dead name X.
I get so confused when in like news and such, there's a link to X, and I'm like, which obscure website are I gonna try to send me to, until I realize, oh,
They're sending you to X video.
There was a huge little side thing here. There was actually a huge problem in terms of search engines and stuff, because usually particular websites, about sharing pornographic content have X's in their browser or in their URL, and they would get blocked. So in some institutions or like news companies and stuff,
that's so funny. But like I think
X would get blocked.
X still in many cases has like Twitter in the URL anyway, so it's like
there's still remnants left of it.
Competent rebranding with elongated muskrat.
All right, so maybe let's start with the bad faith readers.
Yeah,
let's get into it. So I think before we talk about it, we have to differentiate bad faith readers and like hate reading something.
Yeah, I was like, there is the good hater and the bad hater, also known as hater parentheses complimentary and hater parentheses derogatory in my notes, because like obviously you can't often, like from the outside it's difficult to tell if you read like a review that's very aggressive, but like there is a difference between having fun complaining about something you hate, which is, like also the very like communal activity humans have always participated in. It's very normal. Complaining can be fun, but also there are people who get genuinely upset and angry, and they are apoplectic with rage. They are shaking while they type their reviews, and that's
shaking and quaking.
Yeah. And also like a lot of these people who are like so genuinely angry, I feel like often go into their reviews already pissed off. They've heard that there's something wrong with this book. They've heard that it's problematic in some regards. So they go into it in bad faith. They are not interested in engaging with the book.
Yeah.
Honestly, and like on a level playing field of being like, okay, what does it actually contain? But they go in with preconceptions about the author and the content, and then they start nitpicking stuff, which is not actually that relevant. They start blowing stuff out of proportion. And also, a lot of the times, these people just like are just wrong, which is my biggest pet peeve with this.
Yeah.
They say something about a text which is either a gross misreading of something in it or just straight up made up. It's like you're just saying things that are not true, and I am so upset with this because it then puts me in the position of having to defend things I usually don't even like. Defend, it's like, this is like, I hate it when something I don't like has like a super aggressive negative review where I'm just like, you're wrong about it. It sucks, but you're mad for the wrong reasons. I don't want to defend this. I don't like.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Why are you making me defend this?
That's exactly what I wrote down too. I wrote like, hate readers read something for the fun of criticizing it, and then the bad faith readers, they read something with the intent of misinterpreting it or like cherry picking on purpose.
Yeah, and also like there's obviously an aspect that you can't really ignore in regards to bad faith, which is that being angry and having very inflammatory, negative, hot takes about popular things gets you a clout, and depending on what social media you do this on, it can also give you just straight up money.
It gives you internet
which
points.
Obviously incentivizes this kind of bad reading. I remember having like watched a review from somebody about a book that I hadn't read yet, but like just from the review, this person was so mad. And I was like, this feels like it was, I think the review was for Artemis from Andy Weir.
Oh, yeah.
Because like, I've since read other reviews which also were like, it's not nearly
good.
As good as
it's not, no.
But like seeing, like putting the criticisms of the YouTuber I watched this review from, compared to other similarly negative critiques, it was just like, you're just not honest about like the parts of the books that are bad. Like, you also mentioned the other parts where people are like, yeah, this is just genuinely not that good. You're just so mad about stuff that isn't either very important, or you nitpicked a tiny thing and you blew it so out of proportion that it misrepresents what this book even is.
I mean, I read Artemis and I was shocked. I wouldn't have bought the book had it not had Andy Weir on it, because The Martian is one of my favorite stories, like book, movie, everything ever. I love it. I could watch the movie 1,000 times. But already the premise from Artemis made me go, I don't know. I bought the book, I read it, I didn't like it, because he so spectacularly failed writing a female character. But I feel there was a lot of bad faith reviewing for that book, because there were a lot of accusations against the author of having some sort of agenda at some point. And because of that, writing the book in a way. Which, if you decide to believe him, if you read the interviews about him for Artemis, that's not the case. He genuinely believed that what he was writing was in some sort of way a good representation because of conversations with his female friends and like editor and stuff. But that was already a part where a lot of people went into it just having heard, oh, Artemis, you know, feels kind of...
they were like, oh, yeah, this is so sexist. And it's like, well, it's not, even from the excerpts I've seen, it's not a very realistic representation of what a woman would be like.
I feel it's not even realistic for what a human would be like.
Yeah, it's also just not that offensive. Like, that's another part that bothers me so much, when people are just like, wow, this book is like so deeply sexist or deeply racist, and you read it and it's like, yeah, it's got some problematic tropes in it. It's like, it certainly isn't like the best representation, but I am begging you to read more books, because I promise you a deeply racist or a deeply sexist or a deeply homophobic book reads very differently from this. This is like somebody trying and not being very good at it, which is still like, the result is still like bad writing of a minority group, which is mostly just kind of annoying. Like, I think we shouldn't overstate the harm singular books can have, especially because the negative representations usually are just like mirrors of what society broadly already believes. Like, these things don't originate in these books. And comparatively, books are read by a tiny percentage of the population. So it's like, let's not overstate the harm. It's mostly just kind of annoying and just not good writing. But like, seriously, read something written by a genuine misogynist, by somebody who seriously considers women to be less, and then come back and tell me Artemis is like deeply sexist and horrible. It's like, no, it's clearly just somebody who doesn't really understand the inner world of whatever he was trying to write. Clearly just not very successful on the whole on writing a person. But it really is just like, please, I'm begging you to look at some of the actual fucked up shit that is out there from people who write genuinely problematic stuff before you get your pitchforks out for just like missteps and like just kind of annoying shit.
For the people who do want to get their pitchforks out, there's a subreddit called r/men writing women. That subreddit is... Sometimes I think these authors write a book so badly on purpose just to end up in that subreddit, because I could never believe that something like this actually makes it through the whole editing process, the reviewing process. This thing could get sold to a publisher, like actually being read. And there's even, they have something, is it called the Steve King Sunday or something? Because Steve King writes a lot of assholes in his book, so from the perspective of these assholes, they are sexist, and sometimes you don't really know whether he like does this on purpose or whether it's just a product of his stories. But they had like a themed Stephen King thing, because at some point the entrances of Stephen King's books in this subreddit got too much. It was at some point it was just
That's
Stephen King.
so funny.
So they were like, we have to tone it down. We have to give other bad authors the opportunity to describe women badly.
I mean, honestly, like, I haven't read a lot of Stephen King. As I said, I recently read one book.
Yeah.
And, like, I did not get the impression that the writing was sexist. It had several, like, perspectives from female characters, and they were just realized people. Like, their writing didn't feel infantilizing. They were all three, I think, very different people who all had their own hang-ups, which made them kind of unsympathetic in their own ways. But, like, it didn't read like somebody who doesn't think of their female characters in the same depth as the male characters. I mean, I don't know about the other books, but often it's just like, yeah, if you're writing an asshole character, that's just like, yeah, if you want to write a misogynist, they gotta be misogynistic. Like,
so far I've only...
You gotta commit to the bit if you're doing it.
So far I've only read It from him, and that's such a long-ass book that I never kind of tried to get into Stephen King again. And there are some stuff in It where it's like, is it really from the perspective, or do we really need to know that her nipples are hard underneath her nightdress, stuff like that. It's like, nah. Yeah, but at the same time, it's this kind of franchise of horror where it's so, like, usually done to have, like, these situations be, like, kind of, like, slasher style.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And, like, obviously, those things can be annoying, and I'm not here to defend any author in particular, and I can totally believe that given that all these male authors grow up just as the female authors in a deeply misogynistic society, that they also just incorporate things they don't really think about. They're just like, yeah, I've read this in a bunch of books. This is just what goes into a scene like this.
Yeah.
So it's just there. It's not even something you consider. And I think it's also... I feel like a sub like men writing women really deprives the world of, like, some of the really bad writing on women done by women. Like,
give us more bad women writing women.
There are genuinely also women who write stuff like that is on the tier of breasting boobily down the stairs. Some women just also write like this. It's like,
but
we've got to do equal opportunity making fun of the misogyny, because, like, oh boy, if you read, like, books written by some of these, like, Mormon women or whatever, you read them and you're like, oh boy, there is so much wrong with
if only Bella booped breastily down the stairs, that would have been something.
Weirdly enough, like,
she doesn't, right?
Twilight is fairly, like, respectful of the female characters, and of Bella, it's like, honestly, from what I know of Mormonism and Mormon culture, I'm like, it's not a feminist book by any means, but it doesn't feel as misogynistic as I could have expected, knowing what I know about Mormonism.
But that's the thing that sucks about, like, bad faith readers, like, piling onto this very niche thing that you could critique about a book. It's like, how about we actually see the bad impact of, sexism, for example, in a book for what it is? And how about we focus on the other also very problematic parts that you are completely glossing over because you get brownie points on the internet by screaming, oh, this book is sexist. That makes me unhappy because, for example, again, especially with Artemis, there was a lot of things wrong in this book. Also, if we take in consideration the religion and, like, ethnicity of our main character she was supposed to have, or that she is having in the book, that was also not properly researched. Simply dumbing down the critique on that, it's not fun. It's not fun at all. I don't like it.
I also, like, again, I understand that, like, very aggressive and intense critique is, like, so much more appealing as, like, a... from a media
to
standpoint,
consume it,
people love to see people tear into something even if they don't know it. But I don't know, I've watched a few of those, especially when I was younger, but at this point in time, I'm just kind of tired of them. I think it's kind of an interest, it shows kind of a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness to engage with the material from the reviewer, where I just feel like, well, is this even a proper, like, review? If you aren't even able to admit that there were parts of it that were good or interesting or possibly engaging, then I feel like you're not doing your job. It's the same as when people like take extremely popular things and then are like, God, I've read some of the worst books ever, guys. And it's like a widely popular book, and it's like, well, is it great? No, again, I don't even like this. I'm not here to defend it. For example, you can critique Sarah J. Maas as much as you want.
We've done
you
plenty.
can make fun of Throne of Glass. I happily will do so as well. But pretending that you don't understand what the appeal to any audience could be makes me think that you're either extremely stupid or that you're just dishonest for, like, brownie points on the internet of being like, look how woke I am. I don't even understand why someone could enjoy this. It's like, well, maybe you should think a little more if you don't understand this.
I feel like this happens so much in like with anything that's popular in pop culture.
Yeah.
And there's always a group of people, and usually the victims are, you know, women, or like women passing, like feminine passing hobbies or topics that are usually like the butt of the joke of this, where it's said, this cannot be as good, and it's not a masterpiece, you know, it's not. So the whole group of fans and everybody who enjoys this series, this show, this book, whatever, gets degraded to something less. And it's like what you said, the book isn't bad, but just because it's popular, even though it's not, you know, magnum opus of somebody, it doesn't mean that it should be this, like, bashed by the public or by everybody else.
It's especially when a lot of people only engage with it on the level of these, like, popular reviews, which are just not entirely, at least, intellectually honest a lot of the time. Like, it's the same when, like, you know, when Game of Thrones ended and the last seasons were pretty bad. And then there were a lot of people coming out of the woodwork like, it was never good. I knew from the beginning this would be bad. I knew better. Look how problematic it was on every axis. And it's just like, well, you are just literally misrepresenting the text here.
Yeah.
Like, is there a lot of fucked up shit that happens in Game of Thrones? Yeah, but the text is not supportive of most of it. Like, the text, like, they push a child out of a window to keep their, like, incest affair a secret. The text is not like, yeah, you should do this is valid. The text is like, hey, maybe don't do that, it's probably not good. And the text is also like, hey, there's a lot of war, and look at all the garbage shit that happens because these rich people insist on fighting over a dumb throne, which isn't even that important. Look how everyone suffers because of it. And it's like, it's not saying that the suffering is good. It's clearly making a point, but you didn't engage with the material honestly enough to admit that even if the point doesn't, I feel like, come across as well in the series as it does in the books, it's still being made. And like,
I get what you're saying, and I also think it's definitely, like, for example, with Game of Thrones, all of the people that you said came up afterwards and said it was always bad are just straight up lying. The first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones are very, very good, like, TV.
There's a reason it was popular. It was a really well done, like, character-focused political drama with fantastical aspect. It was really good. All the, like, the actors, the cinematography, all of it is really well done. The costuming is insane.
And that stayed insane until the end of the show.
Yeah, that costume department fucked hard. Like
they got the check.
Were doing so well.
They were being paid, hopefully.
But yeah, no, it's like, but then there's so many people who like were put off, rightfully so, by a lot of the trigger warnings for it, and were like, oh, I'm not gonna watch this because I know I'm not gonna enjoy it. And then they mostly just see the loudest critics, which are often the critics who are the most wrong often. Like, these people are so aggressive and angry, but you know how the internet works, it amplifies this kind of heightened emotion, so a lot of people just get straight up wrong information, and then they go through life with that wrong information and
they never look it up.
Disseminate it to more people, and then a lot of people just have this entirely wrong perception of a text, and it's just like,
ooh, yeah,
I hate that, because again, often it's not even stuff I want to defend. I'm just like, I hate when people say things that are incorrect. I don't like it.
This brings me to my second bullet point I have on my list.
Yes,
one thing. This is a general fandom dynamic, and being of the Voltron fandom, as a bystander, I am quite familiar with it. I was not part of it. I'm gonna say this.
You were right next to the trenches.
I watched them go. I woke up to my Tumblr dashboard on fire. It's the Delulu ones. So the people who get like really strong headcanons because they either misinterpret the text or because they like really focus on a small detail somewhere. And then they get so like prissy and miffed and aggressive if that doesn't happen in canon, because surprise, the author had a different idea where their story was going, and you took a tiny detail or just completely made something up and started a fandom-wide war over it. I feel like this is a daily occurrence in, for example, any Sarah J. Maas book fandoms, where people just fight each other. And I do not mean the people who make the cute little conspiracy theory TikToks. Those are fun.
Yeah.
I
not
love
the
them.
Unhinged people who are just vibing and being like, I know what will happen in the next book. Here is information that makes literally no sense.
I love those. I genuinely mean the people who would send death threats to artists for drawing certain couples or scenes because they think that they have the definite proof somewhere in the book that something else is going to happen. And this is especially funny to me, or like unnerving to me in a sense, if it's a book series like ACOTAR that isn't really popular or known for tying up loose ends. So finding parts in the book that haven't been resolved yet or that seem a bit fishy isn't it like you don't get a golden star for it, because
yeah, if you find anything odd in ACOWAR, it's like, yeah, that book was barely edited. Of course there's shit in there that makes no sense.
And that to me is such a pet peeve, because it adds nothing. The conspiracy girlies, they're adding conspiracies. The ones with the fun headcanons that are fun and cute and like don't get taken too far. It's a cute little addition if you want to believe that. But the ones that are like building a cult following somewhat on these misinterpretations, they get on my nerves a lot.
Yeah, no, that also ties into a point that bothers me personally. It's an entitlement from readers. This doesn't happen as much with big book series, but I just remember viscerally, I forgot the name of the author because I didn't know them before I heard of this, but they were sent death threats and harm threats, and like they were almost doxxed by people because they wrote like a popular, I think, queer book something with like a small cult fandom, and somebody in the fandom was like, hey, what are like the, I think, star signs of the main character? And the author was just like, hey, you know what, I just didn't think about this isn't important to me as a writer, so I don't know. I can't tell you. You can make up whatever you want, basically. And then these people, they got so mad about not receiving this information. They got more aggressive and started sending her death threats. They started sending her threats of harm, suicide, all of this. And they were defending themselves by like, oh, she could have just given us the information when we asked. She made us do this. And I was just like, you are insane. It is no wonder that so many authors don't want to interact with any fan ever, which is so valid, because look at what you people do.
Yeah.
Especially to an author who's already marginalized themselves. It's like, are you insane? What the fuck is wrong with you?
I feel like sending threats in any sort of way is already, how can you, like, like for me, on a logical basis, already... like, how does this happen? How do you get so involved with somebody who doesn't even know you to send that?
Massively unhinged people.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, it's just a death threat, it's not that serious. I mean, everyone sends them like for funsies, and it's
crazy.
Just like, you are lying.
Yeah.
You know this would upset someone, and that is why you sent it. You know exactly what you're doing, but you don't want to admit to it, because then you'd look as bad as you actually are.
Yeah.
And that's not a great thing to realize about yourself.
Crazy people.
That's just I brought this up also because you mentioned Voltron, where this also happened, where a lot of the voice actors got like threats and like harassment for like things they aren't even responsible for. Like, that's a voice actor, not the writer, not the director. It's not in their control what happens on the show. They just voice a funny little made-up guy. I don't know what you want.
Yeah, the Voltron thing was crazy. For the people who don't know, there's probably analysis videos on YouTube, like, summing the whole thing up.
I am sure there are deep dives into what the fuck happened.
The too long didn't experience for this was, it's an animated show on Netflix. It has a lot of short, like, episodes of very short. Seasons were like rolled out in a quite a fast succession, I might say.
Wasn't it like 8 seasons over 3 years or less?
It was also half seasons. So I think in total it's like 4 seasons or 5, and then at some point they started doing half seasons. And due to you like being able to binge it, there was a lot of fast consumption of the show, and it got a lot of momentum, and to a point there was a group, or like a couple of groups inside of fandoms that kind of, it felt like they were watching a different show, because they had so many headcanons and so many ideas about how it was going, that they had this alternative timeline. And even after new episodes came out, they continued of what would have happened if it had been aligned to their beliefs. And then they were surprised that even like 2 seasons later, or 2 half seasons later, things were still not happening like they wanted them to happen. And then there was, since it's a show with teenage characters, there's the whole thing about age differences in there as well. And then on Twitter, on X, some of the voice actors interacted with fans, and some of them said things that other fans didn't agree with, and it also ended in death threats to everyone. Also death threats just blatantly sent to Netflix headquarters to stop the show or to fire certain voice actors or writers, because the fans were so entitled to like the show going a certain way. And it felt like two universes were colliding, and somehow these fans from another universe got stuck in our Tumblr. They were genuinely watching a different show.
Yeah, it's like, it's also an interesting, like, I'm sure there are deep dives, because what happened in the Voltron fandom feels like ground zero for a lot of stuff that happens online nowadays.
It does.
Like, a lot of the discourse around like age caps and stuff feels like it originated there, or at least gained a lot of popularity there, which then shot it into the orbit, and now we all have to consider whether it is problematic for a 21-year-old to date someone who's 19 and a half, because like that is of course an insane age difference, and anyone who's offline looks at you and is like, what the fuck are you taking? Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, genuinely.
Like, but yeah, no, that that like genuinely problematic fan behavior towards like the people making the stuff you're enjoying.
That's crazy.
I feel like that is also just generally like a Twitter problem, or at least amplified by Twitter, which gives access to these people. So it's not a book community exclusive problem, but it is certainly something I fucking hate.
I'm still shocked over the fact that this author got death threats because of zodiac signs.
Yeah, it was so crazy. I saw like a Tumblr post about it, and it didn't really explain what happened, so I went on Twitter and looked up her name, and like it was really insane.
That's crazy.
Like you had all the tweets of the people doing it being like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's not like, she could have just told us the information we wanted.
She didn't even have the information, like, that's the thing.
Yeah, she was just genuinely politely like, listen, I don't give a shit about horoscope. Like, she didn't even say it. She was just like, this wasn't important to me when I wrote it, so I don't, this isn't information that exists, so like, sorry, I can't help you, which is just a normal thing to do. And then people went off the charts, which maybe that's just what astrology bitches are like, I don't know. But maybe a variable to consider.
That's crazy. Crazy. I have one thing that is a pet peeve of mine that is, we've talked about this before privately, definitely, and it ties in with like teenage characters and stuff, and that is the over-sexualization of underage characters in books or teen characters. In fan art, by the fandom in fan art, and the way that people talk about these characters, because I understand that if you are a teen and you read books about teens, it's
which are already horny, it's like,
it's completely normal. Like, it's like there was this controversy about when Stranger Things aired, like the first couple of seasons, when people went, oh, unbelievable that others have crushes on these actors, they're so young. And it's like, the people who have crushes on Stranger Things actors back then were teenagers, were children.
How crazy that 14-year-olds think 15-year-olds are cool and admirable.
But
that's
wow. But when you take a character like Jude or Cardan, or from other YA books that are 17 or 16, and you draw them in like weirdly compromising situations, or you just draw them like, I don't know, just weirdly sexy and adult without like writing anywhere like, by the way, I drew this person older because it was uncomfortable of drawing a teenage character like that. It gives a weird vibe. It gives creepy anime dude vibe, you know, which is isekai animes with the weird young characters.
Yeah, I remember after I read, like, I think this must have been after Wicked King came out, at least, maybe after Queen of Nothing. I know I went through, like, the Book of the Year tag, I think, for a while, just looking for, like, art or, like, just seeing what was up. And I think it must have been after maybe Queen of Nothing, where it was like, yeah, these two are definitely together. There were so many people having conversations and, like, writing short fics and imagining about like Jude being pregnant, her having children and all of that, and I'm just like, dudes, she's not, this is a traumatized teenager.
I mean, it wasn't like, wrong with Feyre, so I guess I'm just gonna do it again.
Yeah, there it's also really weird because like, I'm 25, Feyre's like 21 or something in the books.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, why? This was so unnecessary, especially because she's immortal now. They could have just had a child later. This did not need to happen. But yeah, there's this weird, and I think it ties in with like, this will sound a little bit mean, and I guess I'm fine with being a little bit mean.
You are, definitely.
But there are a lot of adults who should read books for adults, but they're stuck on reading books written for 13 to 17-year-olds, and then they need to exercise all their horny energy onto that because they're so scared of reading books for their age demographic that they just don't do it. Because I promise you, there is a lot of romantic fantasy and horny romance fantasy out there. If you like this and you're a 37-year-old woman reading like Cruel Prince because you think the kid, like, ooh, how sexy. It's like, this exists
Where?
for your age group. This exists with sex scenes in it. I promise you, you don't need to read books for kids and then be like, well, I wish it was more like something for adults. And it's like, yeah, maybe because it's for kids and you should fucking read something for adults at least once.
Yeah.
This is so predominant because it's like, oh no, but like YA books are so different and they are so much more diverse. And it's just like, girly, I promise you, adult books are just as diverse, especially if you go into the self-published market. If you want freaky fairy sex, I promise you, there is so much of it out there. I don't even need to look this up. I know this.
And
there is no way there isn't. Literally, just go on Amazon and look for it. If you don't limit yourself to just reading the most popular YA releases, I promise you, you can find some shit that is exactly the same vibes and is not even particularly more mature in its themes, but has more sexy shit in it. You can have that. Yeah. You don't need to sexualize these 15-year-olds. I mean, Cruel Prince, they're not 15. Yeah, but there are other YA books where the characters are much younger and get the same treatment.
I mean, the Six of Crows, I've seen the most weird, uncomfortable fan art of Cass Brecker. And I understand that some of the fans came from the Netflix show and they're all aged up.
Yeah.
But if it's very obvious that it's not like the TV show character but the book character, and then no, that's a tiny so bean.
Funny.
That's a baby boy.
Yeah. Mentioning Six of Crows also, I feel like that also plays heavily into this, where it's just like people are like, wow, Six of Crows is so real and dark, and it's like, no, it's not. It's a kid's book.
It's like, a typical YA book.
For a YA book, it's kind of serious, but like, excuse me, like, teenagers run one of the most, like, powerful gangs in a city. Are you deranged? If you want to read about dark shit with, like, gangs and violence and stuff, I promise you, adult books have that.
Yeah.
You could just read something for adults if you wanted adult themes. Please stop going to YA for your adult themes when you're a fucking adult.
It also makes me... This doesn't make me like as uncomfortable, but I'd say it's a beige flag when people take like, for example, in ACOTAR, all of the characters are described to look kind of young. Like, even recent, he's not described as a 40-year-old dude. He's described as still having a younger face, as still having that youthful spirit. And then you see a fan art of a dude who's like literally 40 being recent. And it's like, I understand that for you being probably in your mid-30s, it's a lot more erotic or a lot more, you know, stimulating to imagine him being a 40-year-old dude than imagining a 25-year-old. But it feels like it's just an outlet for horniness. And like projecting onto that. Like,
if the source material is horny, I do understand it. And also I think I'm less critical of that shit, because honestly, if I can imagine being 30 and reading like adult books where the characters are like at the start of their 20s, but imagining them older because that's just what adults look like to me generally. I think that's like
that's why
it's a beige flag.
It's a beige flag. It's not
kind of, it's not necessary, but like I also get it because, like, let's be honest, most books are about young people and young hot-looking people. You are more likely to find older men still, but like older women in the sexy fantasy genre, that's getting difficult. So I get the projection. It's like it is whatever, especially given that at least in its later iterations, the ACOTAR series is like a lot more just smut than anything else.
It is.
which is fine.
I
mean,
I feel
the
like
smut's not good,
Yeah.
so it's not fine. It should be better, but, you know.
I feel like a lot of these readers would be so happy with the Outlander series. But it doesn't have the fantasy aspect in terms of like dragons or stuff.
Yeah.
It's a time travel thing. So I've seen some people recommending Outlander in the comments, and then the answers were like, but it doesn't have dragons. It's a historical like fiction thingy.
But I'm also like, guys, you barely engage with the fantasy aspects of ACOTAR itself barely engages with
They
its
have
own
pointy
fantasy
ears.
aspect. Yeah, so this is not meaningful fantasy to me, but okay. That's like, I mean, honestly, like, yeah, it's a beige flag. It's like, okay, was this necessary? But it's not as strange to me as people who read books about teenagers and then draw them as like 25-year-old models. Because that difference feels so much more meaningful to me. Because if you don't draw Jude and Carden, for example, looking like fucking angry, like if they don't kind of look like kids, I feel like you're missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are not adults, these are children in a world dominated by people older and more powerful than them who claw their way out of abuse, even though they start at the point where they're kids and they don't have power.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's such a surface level engagement with the story that it feels kind of sad to me. Like, what do you get out of reading these books if you're just here for like there's some sexy interactions, look at some of these dynamics.
Yeah.
It's like, but the story has much more, and if you were willing to engage with that, you could get so much more out of it. Because if you're just interested in the surface trappings, don't a lot of these books end up just being the same?
There was a...
Do you not...
Yeah, no, continue, please.
Like, do you not get bored if you just engage with, like, the least relevant... Like, not to be a hater, I enjoy the Folk of the Air series well enough. Not to be a hater, I say while being a hater.
I mean, yeah.
I like them well enough, but the romance parts are some of the least well executed or interesting parts of it.
Definitely.
Like, from a creative and like storytelling standpoint, it's like, yeah, the dynamic is fun, but it's not an original dynamic, and the execution of it isn't super interesting either.
Mm-hmm.
You can get this in a lot of books. Like, it's not that interesting. So if that's your focus in the books, I'm just like, but what do you even get out of this?
I mean, I'd say if we are looking at the smutty part or the romance part in particular, that would be like saying, why do you continue to have like intimate sexual encounters with the same partner, or with like in general, because obviously at the end of the day it's always the same thing. So I would disagree with that, but I definitely think that there was this, it was like a text post exchange, I don't know if it was on Twitter or Tumblr, of this person being like, well, this book isn't good because it doesn't have a sex scene, and the other person being like, well, it's okay if you only want to read erotica. And the person was like, no, I'm not reading erotica. How dare you? But there needs to be smut in the book. And it's like, just acknowledge the fact that that is something that you enjoy reading. And as you said, especially in smaller or self-published circles, you're gonna find a gold mine of books that you can enjoy.
I guess it's not that I'm like, wow, why are you even reading these books?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, why are you reading the Folk of the Air? Which again,
for
the
that
romance
reason,
aspects are there. But like, if you want romance aspects, there is a giant part of the publishing industry that is just romance books.
Mm-hmm.
And I promise you there is a bunch of fantasy in there too, because romance is a ginormous genre. I think it is, apart from like thrillers, the most sold genre. It is giant. If you want romance, there is so much of it, especially if you're interested in a romance focus. I don't understand why you're then reading books where you're like, God, I wish there was more of this, and this is the part that interests me. Because, like, if I want a well-explored romance, I would also go and read romance. I would not settle for, like, the mediocre work that is in books that are not primarily about it. It's like, I'm not reading Six of Crows for the romance. Like, yeah, sure, whatever Jesper and Willen and Cass and Ines have going on is, like, cute or whatever.
You forgot the best couple of all. Nina and I will not stand for the slander.
Well, Matthias dies. But yeah, Nina and Matthias, that's true. Yeah, what they have going on, like, that's okay. That's, like, well written for the story it is in, but it's not a focus. And if I'm really into those dynamics, I wouldn't read this genre. I'd go to a different genre that has exactly what I'm looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but... this ties so well into another thing I was going to say. I feel like, and this is also something we have previously mentioned, this also is connected to just bad or wrong marketing of books. And one thing that bothers me is that by now that the way the whole reviewing process and sending out arcs has turned from, you know, back in the day when you had blogs and people were sent arcs, and most of these blogs were like these long texts of a review for a book, and they were usually, you know, depending on the blog, quite good or bad, but they were always truthful to a sense. Like, there was never a reason as to completely gush over a book. And by now, this whole reviewing thing has become more of an influencer like flavor to it.
It's like, hey, if I give everything good reviews, I'll get more arcs. But I'm also like, girl, why do you even want the shit arcs? Like, sorry, but like, if these books aren't good, I wouldn't want an arc.
And the thing is, if you know that a lot of your followers love to read these kind of smutty books, and then you get, for example, an arc for Cruel Prince, or, you know, another book in that direction, the YA direction, and you market it with the same language and the same wording as you would do with a smut book, without saying, but remember, this is YA. You know, there's a different focus. Then it completely destroys, like, there's no reason for me anymore to watch any of these people's reviews or to look at any of these people's feedback. Because something that I've also noticed with some of the people I follow is that they hype up a book, they rave about it, it's amazing, it's great, they ride the wave, and then a couple months later when somebody asks about it, they say, yeah, no, it wasn't that good. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't that good. And like, it's okay to change your opinion later on, but it's becoming a pattern in a way where it's like, come on, be serious. Like,
especially if these people are like, I was sent an arc to give my honest opinion on.
Yeah.
Because I have also, like, I haven't done that in a while, but when I watched a lot of booktubers, there were a lot of people who were also just like, hey, I was sent this book from this publisher, this and this is in it, sounds interesting. They hadn't read it, they were just like, hey, I got the scent and this looks really cool, I don't have an opinion yet, but I'm intrigued, which... honestly, lying about that is more acceptable. Like, I'll believe you if you say, hey, Caraval sounds interesting.
I mean, if it does, it does.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm like, well, the cover is really cool. I mean, I read it because I thought it was interesting, but I certainly wouldn't stand here and be like, this was really, really good. You guys need to read it. But, like, these people, I don't understand the benefit because, I mean, on the one hand, I am sure there are some of these reviewers who are just so easy to please. Yeah. There are some people who just have zero standards, who are like, if there's one tiny aspect of a book I like, then I like it. And then it's good, and then I can rave about it. And I guess that's fine, but I feel they can't all be like this. They can't all be people who are so easy to please. Yeah. That they give everything 5 stars, even books where I know that they just are not good. And not even on the, wow, Sarah J. Maas's books aren't good. It's a level lower. Yeah, Sarah J. Maas's books are like average to but like books where I know this is genuinely just really, really bad writing. But then it gets hyped up to this degree. I'm just like, I feel like you're just lying at this point.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, but doesn't your audience ever take you to task for that? If I watched someone rave about a book whose taste I trusted, and then I was like, wow, this book was shit. And the first time I'd be like, okay, maybe our tastes are just very different. And like, they really enjoyed it. But if this happened a few times, I'd just be like, okay, they're just dishonest. I literally cannot trust any positive thing they say about a new release ever again. Like, are there no consequences? Can you just do
I
this
feel like it's this
forever?
I feel like it's this typical. So on the one hand, if you like genuinely F up in the book reviewing community, like a book influencer community, I feel like you get cast out pretty fast. But fuck up in the sense of you say something genuinely racist or, sexist or something, you agree with an author that is problematic or stuff like that. But I think everything else flies kind of under the radar because there's this huge we have to stick together mentality, and there's this huge we're all just a big happy book club kind of vibe going on. At least the people that I follow, they all kind of follow each other back.
Yeah.
They post each other's stuff. They're like, look at this review, look at this person putting that up. So there's this, it doesn't feel like a friend group, but it does feel like this collective group of saying, hey, we're all riding the same waves, so we can just stick together. But yeah, I feel like due to the flippant nature of these reviewers and due to them backtracking a couple months later, it makes them feel more natural, and it makes you as a reader go, yeah, now that I've digested this book, it actually really isn't as well, as good as I agree with you. And through that, it doesn't become such a... I feel like what you mentioned is far more critical to people who are professional reviewers in the sense of they write for the New York Times or something like that.
Yeah, it's for people who really actually care about the integrity of their reviews and not just people who are like, hey, I can make some pocket change, or I can make my job being a YouTuber who talks about books, and if I'm really positive about everything, I get a lot of sponsors. And a lot of people still agree with me because I talk about popular and new releases, which have more than enough fans, even if they are technically not well-written books.
And I mean, you can be a very, a reviewer who has integrity, and put that content out, and then it comes to kind of like a honor if you actually give a good review on something, because people are like, oh my god, that person gave that thing a good review. That means, fair and square. It won, sort of. It won the game against the reviewer. Yeah.
But that's not the way to get arcs. If you're interested in getting books earlier and being faster at getting a video out so it gets more views, so you get more money out of it, then you want the books as soon as possible, and then you need to be more positive than negative if you want publishers to be like, yeah, keep that bitch on the list for the arcs,
I remember there was... I don't remember with her handle anymore, but there was one person, especially on TikTok, that when the Stolen Heir, so the sequel of Folk of the Air came out, when that arc came out, the person was doing an inflationary amount of videos being like, oh my god, this book is gonna shock you so much, oh my god, constant videos of putting the book up in their face and being like, oh my god, I read this, guys gonna go crazy. And then there was never a review. Never. The arc was literally just being used to create hype around, to create clicks and to make people subscribe. There was content on the book later in terms of I think it was cosplay videos or art or something, but never a review. Never the person sitting down saying, well, it's because of this. So arcs aren't even being sent out for reviews anymore. They're just being sent out to be held up to a camera and said, this will exist.
Yeah, promotional material, basically. But
already with a grading on the book, being like, oh my god, it's great, but no genuine review. It's just a tick.
I think this also ties into something else that bothers me, which is that basically, which I guess is to be expected, but the book community online is like insanely obsessed with almost exclusively like new releases and a few popular authors who are like a little bit evergreen, but most of the time it's just like the newest stuff, and then after its cycle is over, it doesn't get talked about unless it's one of the popular evergreen series that always gets brought up. It's so... I think that's also why I stopped watching BookTube after, like, a while, because, like, one, in every recommendation list, you get the same shit.
Yeah.
People almost always recommend the same things, except for, like, one or two people who I still, like, follow on YouTube who genuinely recommend stuff that isn't popular or well-known, and who are also much smaller channels than the big ones who are really popular. I wonder why. It's just exhausting because there is no way you have this much to say about new releases all the time. But also, this is just consumerism for books.
Yeah.
Like, there are millions, there are billions of books already published. There are so many really good ones that are just not super well known that it would be super interesting to hear about, and I'd be delighted to get recommendations of things that aren't just the same 5 authors over and over. You don't need to recommend me Six of Crows again. You don't need to recommend me Gilded Wolves again. You don't need to recommend me anything from V.E. Schwab again. If you have read any fantasy books, these names are everywhere. I don't understand people doing like recommendation lists where it's like, but these names are already everywhere. Everyone has heard of these books before. What is the point of this?
Definitely.
Like,
and it also gets difficult if you decide to venture out and be like, give me recommendations, give me something.
Yeah, because everyone recommends the same shit.
Yeah, it's impossible to get like a new opinion without having to dig a lot further. And maybe that's, me being lazy, or that's just like humans being lazy in general, but I don't want to have to fight for recommendations. Then I would rather just go into the bookstore, jump over my introvert shadow, and ask some of the shop assistants and be like, what is something that is, in this bookstore that's not super popular but that you think is good? Because I've done this like a couple of times, and usually they come up with quite some gems, and then you read them and you're like, this is interesting, this is fun.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't care about the genre. I did that once, and it was a science book, and I was like, I would have never bought that, I would never read that, but it was interesting.
Yeah. I feel like I also like to give recommendations, and usually the stuff I recommend you is stuff that, one, I think you will like, but also stuff that I know you haven't heard of before necessarily. Like, I love recommending my favorites, which are not super well known. Of course, a lot of the books I've read are also on, like, the lists, even if it's, like, not the super popular ones, but still some that get mentioned now and again, because that's how I found out about them, like, obviously. But, like, yeah, when I look for recommendations, I don't need you to tell me to read Sarah J. Maas, Holly Black, V.E. Schwab, Brandon Sanderson. Like, I have heard these names all before. If I were interested, I would have already picked up their books. So either they're already on my list, I've already read them, or I know I'm not interested. Give me things that are less mainstream, and I would also love more specific recommendations than just like, oh yeah, this is a good book.
Yeah.
Because then I'd first need to know the person reviewing it to figure out what they consider a good book.
I think
I would prefer recommendations, because I guess that's also how I give them, because I think that's good to be like, hey, this is slow-paced, fast-paced, this is character-focused, or this is more plot-focused, that has like an ensemble cast and is just kind of more of an exploration than like a focused plot. Like, I would like these things to be included so that I can get a feel for what the vibe is, because just because a story has a certain trope in it doesn't mean it's the same. Like, there are many stories I've read that had like, I don't know, you have so many stories that can have some sort of chosen one, which are so fundamentally different, just story structure wise and based on their vibes, that you get an entirely different experience. And if somebody's looking for one of those specific experiences, this recommendation doesn't help them. They'll have 10 books where they're like, this wasn't really what I was looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that also bothers me when it comes to that is, so I genuinely like when people say this book is a mix of A and B. What I do not like if that's the only thing. I need to be told why a thing is like A and B.
Yeah, what parts it has.
What parts of it.
Two.
Because especially when people go, this is like Lord of the Rings, which is something that's being said a lot in fantasy books. I'm like, is it like Lord of the Rings because we have elves and dwarves? Is it like Lord of the Rings because our heroes go on a long and arduous journey? Is it
like Lord of the Rings because it's gay as fuck? We don't know.
Yeah, like what about the subtones? You know, I need to know why a thing is like, especially with Lord of the Rings. It's like one of my pet peeves. When I read that anywhere, I'm like, why? Or is it just straight up fantasy?
Lord of the Rings is like almost worse than when it's like, oh, it's like Harry Potter meets that and that, and it's like, it's not quite worse because they also are like, oh, it's like Harry Potter meets that and that if it's like high fantasy, and that's like, Harry Potter's urban fantasy. Get that shit out of the fusions where it's like about high fantasy. This is just so incorrect. At least Lord of the Rings is also high fantasy, and nobody says it's like Lord of the Rings if you have urban fantasy, because then they're like, it's like Harry Potter meets this and this. Like, and also it's like, it's the same like 5 titles every, like 10 things remixed to be like combined over and over, and it's like, okay, but this is ultimately a useless statement at this point. I don't.
It's so that's one of those things as well. I just wanted to add where I'm like, give a little bit more flavor. And I understand people recommending books just by the vibes and being like, I vibed with it so hard, you're gonna vibe with it the same. But that only works if you know each other quite well.
Yeah, that only works. I also am fascinated when there's a list of books that are like, where people are like, recommending you books with this vibe or whatever, and I know every book on that list, and I'm like, at least half of that list is not, does not belong on this list. Like, I know this book, and you were incorrect in being like, these books are like each other. It's like, listen, I understand in your heart you like all of them, and that makes them seem alike, but they don't belong on this list together. This does not go together. Please stop.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that is what happens generally when, like, anything turns into, like, an online marketing community, basically.
Yeah.
Where people just make listicles, and it's like, but these lists aren't accurate or, like, helpful at this point anymore.
Yeah.
It's just content to churn out because you need to make a video a day for TikTok, so you need to have something to say, and like people click and like videos if they recognize the name of a book they like, so you gotta include the popular releases, you gotta include the new stuff, because you gotta make content that people watch and comment on. It's just exhausting.
There was this like, it wasn't a trend in a sort of way, it was like a way that videos were edited, where it was like, you like this and this and this aspect of that one book, here are recommendations, and then there would be like, you know, a hand coming into the screen like holding different books. And one video that was quite popular in the community as well was something along the lines of, you like the toxic, dark, blah 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 boyfriend looking like, you know, like this typical YA kind of horny person, and then instead of a book they were holding up a sheet of paper that said therapy. So that was one of those recommendation videos that I quite enjoyed.
That is funny.
But yeah, I feel like whenever TikTok changes its algorithm and I get more videos with low numbers of likes and stuff, then I get some good recommendations, because these are people just like with the smaller channels on YouTube that don't have such a big audience, because, you know, the keywords don't hit.
They just say things they genuinely mean. They're like, hey, I want to recommend books that aren't super. That's also like, I saw a video that was like, hey, here are some lesser well-known books you should check out. And they were all books where I was like, these were insanely popular on YouTube like 4 years ago. I have heard all of them like 10 times when I was watching people's like what I read this month for 2 months. Like, this is not an unknown book. Stop lying to me. Why are you doing this?
I've been here longer than you.
Yeah, it's just like, this is not an unknown book. You can't pretend this is not well known. It's not a Sarah J. Maas or a Brandon Sanders or a J.R.R. Martin, but it is not obscure on any level. Anyone who's looked into YA fantasy has seen this book. Please stop.
There's one more topic I have on my list that I cannot create such a smooth transition for, because it's something completely different. One of the pet peeves that I have is spoiling people on purpose or making fun of people who haven't reached a certain point in a book series yet where something happens. And the thing is, especially with old book series, it's like, this book is 10 years old, you know? Like, it's been out there, it's been known.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like if you just post about it, that's just a normal thing to do. But if you specifically send it to somebody who you know is not interested in knowing the spoilers because they want to read it, that's a dick move.
Like, I've seen a lot of videos where it's like, oh, you know, not knowing why people are talking about this alien person when reading the first Throne of Glass book, where it's like, that's kind of cute. But for instance, making a video making fun of people who like Tamlin because these people have only read ACOTAR so far, and then explicitly tagging it with ACOTAR so that people who are reading the book are finding it as well, this video, and being like, wait, what is wrong with Tamlin? I've read about this guy, he's great. You know,
like, I mean, he's kind of a dick, but he's not worse than other book boyfriends. Like, he's par for the course.
But that's like the specific spoilers. Yeah, putting them into videos with tons of tags so that others see them. Of course, you want a video to go viral, but I feel like there's a fine line between making funny content and tagging it correctly so that people find it, and making content that is basically spoilers without tagging it spoilers, because that's also always an option. You can tag something spoilers, and then if you have blacklisted that word, you're not gonna see it.
Yeah, I do think that's like kind of a dick move.
I've just seen it so many times. I personally
really don't care about spoilers. And, like, again, if a book has been out for a while and has been popular, and especially something like ACOTAR that has also had popular discourse about it, where people know about the discourse without knowing the books, I feel like there it's more forgivable. It is. But it's also, sometimes when you're literally just making content that's, like, baiting people who don't want spoilers but aren't there in the books yet, it's just like, you're kind of a dick.
It's also it's also a community thing where I remember when Crescent City 2 came out, a lot of the influencers or like the book people got sent spoilers by people who like got the leaked stuff, because there were some leaks for Crescent City 2, and they just sent that stuff to the book influencers without any warning, and then they kind of ruined their reading experience. And a lot of the influencers also said, hey guys, please be mindful of people who haven't read this book yet. It's a long book. We should only start talking about like spoilery stuff in like a month or two, because not everybody has the time to just annihilate a 900-page book in, you know, a week or something. And then they had to kind of really moderate their comments underneath their own posts, because people would keep putting spoilers into their Instagram posts for these books, even though the influencers would like say,
we're asking,
please. So it wasn't about other people posting their own stuff, it was about, please be mindful of our community underneath the posts. I had to delete comments because people could not behave.
God, that's just... that's so frustrating. I think it's especially, fucked up if it's, like, people who get arcs and then, like...
I wonder...
get spoilery. I'm like, is this... I feel like this might... I mean, often a lot of especially popular influencers get arcs just unsolicited. There is no contract, so it's not...
It just gets sent to them.
But it's just... I feel like if you receive an arc, there at least is the implication that this is unreleased content and you're not supposed to share the particulars yet.
I think you also shouldn't... I don't know if it's like just etiquette or if it's even without a contract, if it's like binding, but that you're not allowed to give arcs to just any other person, or you're not allowed to put it into like a book box before the book is even out and then just put that box out on the street. I think there was something like that.
It is also, you are definitely legally not allowed to ever sell an arc or profit of it otherwise. Which makes sense because it's like, it's not the finished released product, so if you ever sell it, it's like...
you're not allowed to make profit of it.
It's... Yeah.
But that's... I wondered that when making this list and thinking about the whole... The advertising thing that we talked about, I wonder if S.J. Ma's books even have arcs. If they even get sent out. Because I feel like it's too big of a security risk for her.
Not just that, I don't think that she's like timely enough for them to have arcs.
I feel like at a certain point the book has to be able to be printed, and even if you send out those arcs like 2 weeks before.
But that doesn't... Usually arcs are sent out early, and also arcs still aren't the finished product. They also go through edits afterward again, like especially like spelling and everything. So there are edits afterwards, but I also don't think it's customary to send out arcs for products that have enough hype anyway. It's just not... There are no benefits to the cost. I also don't think you would get arcs for Brandon Sanderson books, or you get arcs for whenever J.R.R. Martin decides to release another book. True. You know, there isn't really a point in putting out arcs besides advertising, and especially if it's in a series, you don't need to. Yeah, because that's just not really done. There are often arcs for like first books, and especially for like debut authors, but I don't think arcs are... I mean, at this point it's also just like, well, people might just like leak the whole thing if we give them an arc. Yeah. So.
But that's something I was thinking about. But yeah, looking at my lists, I've gone over the pet peeves that I was able to come up with. I don't know, do you have anything else on your list?
Yeah, I have one last thing that also isn't really a good segue from anything else. It's kind of its own thing, which is that there is this weird debate still, I feel like it will go on forever, where people are arguing whether audiobooks count as reading.
Oh my god.
Or if audiobooks are valid, which is so strange to me, because ultimately it's just like, this is just semantics over what reading specifically means to you. Yeah. Like, I personally, for my own reading tracker, would not count audiobooks, because the reason I track my reading is because I want to spend more time literally doing the activity of looking at words on a page. Yeah. It's to motivate me to actually read the books I own and actually spend more time with that hobby because I know I enjoy it and want to do more of it. But it's not because I think an audiobook is a lesser experience. It's just that I track for a specific reason, so it just doesn't fit into the parameters of what I'm tracking. I also don't literally track all books I read on Goodreads, for example, because there's sometimes books I read that are nonfiction or for university and stuff where it's just like, I'm not
Why would you rate
putting that on my Goodreads. What for? That's not a social media book I want to even talk about. It's not relevant here. But yeah, no, the audiobook discussion is so weird to me because it's like, obviously it's as valid as consuming the story any other way, Like, are we gonna start moderating if reading a book in Braille is still reading the book because you're not literally doing it with your eyes?
That's what I was about to say.
Stupid.
I feel like this discussion is also quite ableist in a sense. Because it says, well, if you can't read for whatever reason, either you have a certain degree of blindness or you have issues of concentrating on a page or sitting still or something. And, reading...
Or you just literally can't read well.
Or you can't read well, dyslexia and stuff. And then it's like, well, you don't read, but this person has been listening to audiobooks nonstop forever, and they know the content. They can't talk about it. It's such a weird discussion to me. To me, this feels like... It's among the same flavor of, are you really a mother if you had a C-section? It's like, did you really read the book if you just listened to it? It's such a stupid thing to me.
Yeah, I feel like it comes from people who have imposed on themselves the limitation that it only counts as reading if they actually read and not listen to it, and then they're angry that other people take a perceived shortcut and are kind of diminishing their own achievement, which is like, dude, you can literally just do whatever you want. Like,
I mean,
you don't have to read if you don't want to, and what other people do with their time is literally none of your business. This is the dumbest shit imaginable.
If you want to go even further, there's even more pedantic people who say you have to have it, like, as a physical copy because ebooks don't count. There's also that crowd of people who say an ebook doesn't count.
So stupid on top of it. It's like, why would this not count? You're literally just reading. It's like, no, do you know electronic newspaper actually doesn't count as reading the newspaper?
No.
You don't know the news. You didn't read... You didn't read a real printed newspaper, you fucking casual.
Yeah.
You don't get to talk about the news. You didn't read this article, you just looked at it on your iPad.
Or even worse, you listened to it on the radio.
Or worse, you used a text-to-speech app because you were driving and you just wanted to know the news.
No, but... Oh, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, that's such a stupid discussion because for me there is no discussion to be had.
Yeah.
It's one of those instances.
It's a non-issue, but it keeps coming up again and again, and every time I see it again, I'm like, is this... Who is even talking about? Stop talking about it. If somebody says it's not real reading, ignore them. Just...
Yeah. There was one...
You don't need to engage.
There was one of the people I follow where she was like, sometimes she has a book that sometimes she reads it physically, and then when she goes somewhere like shopping, driving with the car, she listens to the ebook, like the audiobook. And then when she wants to like physically read it again, she like struggles to find the page, so she always tries to stop at chapters, so she kind of like, knows where she stops. And then the person was like, well, why don't you just read it completely? Why do you even use the audiobook? And it's like, she said why she wants to use the audiobook. Because when you're driving your car, you shouldn't be reading a physical copy. But she wants to advance in the story. And it's like, why do you get hung up on that? It's the most... Yeah.
Yeah, it's like... It really is just like such a who give a shit moment.
Yes.
Where it's like...
Yes. Why are you so bothered? Why are you so bothered?
Yeah.
It's like people losing their shit over whether to read a hard copy or soft cover.
I'm just like... Often I'm just like, dude, the soft cover is cheaper. This is why I'm reading the soft cover. I don't know what to tell you. I don't want to spend twice as much money for a slightly nicer version if it doesn't really change anything.
Like, I understand pretty books. I understand Illumicrate editions or stuff like that. But if I just want to read the book, leave me be. Or... Yeah.
I'm also just like... I mean, this is obviously a personal choice, but I also don't really get people who, like, buy several versions of the same book just because all the editions look pretty. I'm like, listen, if I already own the book, I don't buy it again. The content is the same. There is no good reason for me to buy it again. Because, like, if I want to see the pretty cover, I can literally just Google the image and look at the image.
I would disagree with that, but I think in that instance, it's just a collector's thing.
Yeah.
It's a collector's thing, and people collect all kinds of stuff, and I
That's
don't
true.
always get it why people would collect certain things. But yeah, sometimes it's also for sentimental reasons. You know, getting the same book in different editions because it's your favorite book. So you have that one book and different editions. If I'm gonna be honest, if for some reason they're gonna revamp the whole series of the Edge Chronicles, you're gonna sweat your like sweet ass on it, then I'm gonna buy that series for like $300 or something. I don't care. You know, I wouldn't care.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I feel like it's a collector's thing.
Yeah, I think I just don't really get that. I'm not that sentimental about the books I own. I'm like, I have like, when they did a re-release of the Grisha trilogy, I was so upset that I already owned them.
I
was
know,
like, oh,
you
these
were so
covers are so
envious.
much prettier. But it's also like, I don't even like the series that much. There's literally no reason to spend more money on it. Like, I got the whole trilogy for €10 on Amazon. I'm not gonna invest 30 or 40 euros now to have the set just a little prettier. Like,
Yeah,
what would be the point?
exactly. And it's also at some point it's a space issue.
That is also true. Yeah, I guess I am trying to read like just more stuff from the library now, just to, you know, not spend as much money, but also just because I don't actually want to own so many of those books. Because if they're underwhelming and not that good, I'm like, do I really want this on my shelf? I don't actually care that much.
What I have done is I read books from the library, or I get books, you know, lent from other people, and if I like them, I do buy that book because I'm like, I would love to have that in my shelf. But
I have done that too. I've read books where I was like, oh, this was really, really good. And then I bought it because I knew I wanted to reread it anyway.
I just bought the Hunger Games trilogy and the extra one a year ago, even though I've read them plenty of times because a friend of mine had the books. But I never owned them by myself. So I was like, you know what? I love the books. I love the whole show. I love the Hunger Games era, everything about it. I want them in my shelf. So I finally bought them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get them. So I think that's totally valid. But yeah, I feel like the whole library thing also goes hand to hand into getting recommendations that you wouldn't usually get. Because
I mean,
libraries are kind of like also their own little cosmos, especially in our case, since we're not in an English speaking country. So we have a couple of other varieties as well, like more European books, for example.
Yeah, I could read City of Bones in French if I wanted to.
Really?
But like, yeah. But do I want to? No.
Oh, why not? Oh, oui, oui. But yeah, it's that's also a thing with a pet peeve, but that's just basic like economy and stuff, is that a lot of good books that are bigger in Europe are not as big like overseas.
Yeah, in America.
Like the whole Dragon Rider and Shadow, how would you translate it, Shadow Fighter series.
Oh yeah, the Italian ones. Yeah, they're so good.
We don't talk about the third
really good.
The third series. The third one was kind of weird. But the first
I don't like
two
that
ones,
one as much either. The covers all are really sexy though. They're so well done. They're so pretty.
The covers are amazing.
The cover art is really good. I love that they kept hiring the same illustrator for it. It's like, thank you, Italian publishing house, for doing this.
Thank you for all the other publishing houses of also keeping with it and not coming up with their own stupid covers. Rare
win for, what is it from? From Heine for keeping the actual covers and not making new covers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also something that bothers me a little bit, because it's like, there's so many good authors all around, and it's like...
Yeah, I think that also, it's also, if you go to the library, there's just a lot of books, and I'm trying to, like, read more books that I just have never heard of just because they sound interesting. A lot of them are just gonna be mediocre, but
yeah, but that's
you
fine.
could also find something that's really good. Unfortunately, obviously, it's unlikely to find one in English because obviously a German library is mostly just gonna acquire English books that are popular
Super
because
popular.
those are the books people ask for and are like, hey, could you acquire this? Hey, I would like to read this. And, you know.
I was so surprised. I don't know who ordered this, but my library has the whole English series of A Serpent and Dove, all the books, in hardcover even.
I mean,
and
they
it's like,
were really popular.
who did they? Because usually you have to like go to a library and say, I would like to read this book, and if they have enough requests, then they get them. So I wonder which group of girlies went there and said we want to get the Serpent and Dove books.
Yeah, insane shit. Our main library stocks like all Sarah J. Maas stuff in the YA English section, which is not good because I feel like Crescent City is so... I know, but it's so obviously not for kids.
It's also how they sort the books in the German bookstores. Like Silver Flames is right next to School of Good and Evil. You know?
Hey, it's like, hey, would you like something written for 14-year-olds or for 30-year-olds? These are both young adults, by the way.
Yeah. It's quite a span. But yeah.
It's unfortunate.
I think we've finished up with our pet peeves.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a rambly episode. Longer than expected.
I do love to complain. I am a hater at heart, but you know. I am one of the good ones, mind you.
You're a what does it say? I forgot the word. No.
Hater,
you're a hate reader.
Yeah.
Not a bad faith reader. Jesus.
No, I'm generally, as a person, I love complaining.
I know.
And I love criticizing stuff.
It's hard. It's really hard.
This is fun for me.
It's like I'm the good cop. You're the...
Yeah, you need to be nice to balance out whatever shit comes out of me. You're like, I gotta be positive now, damn you.
Just gonna turn your words around. But, well, thank you for listening.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see what other people get bothered by. It was really interesting to see what you specifically got bothered by that I didn't take into consideration. So thank you for listening. And with that said, we're out, I guess.
Yeah.